Hello, fourth form. Today we are going to continue reading chapter 2 of Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. We're going to read from page 14 to page 20. My mother was all dressed up by the time my father got home with the Yarbys. You'd never have guessed that Mum spent most of the day in the kitchen. You'd also never have guessed that Fudge ate 2 flowers. He was feeling fine. He even smelled nice, like baby powder. Mrs. Yarby picked him up right away. I knew she would. She looked like a grandmother. That type always makes a big deal out of Fudge. She walked into the living room, cuddling him. Then she sat down on the sofa and bounced Fudge around on her lap. "Isn't he the cutest little boy?" Mrs. Yarby said. "I just love babies." She gave him a big kiss on the top of his head. I kept waiting for somebody to tell her Fudge was no baby, but no one did. My father carried the Yarby suitcase into Fudge's room. When he came back, he introduced me to our company. "This is our older son, Peter," he said to the Yarbys. "I'm 9 and in 4th grade," I told them. "How do, Peter?" Mr. Yarby said. Mrs. Yarby just gave me a nod. She was still busy with Fudge. "I have a surprise for this dear little boy," she said. "It's in my suitcase. Should I go get it?" "Yes!" Fudge shouted. "Go get! Go get!" Mrs. Yarby laughed, as if that was the best joke she ever heard. "I'll be right back," she told Fudge. She put him down and ran off to find her suitcase. She came back carrying a present tied up with a red ribbon. "Oh!" Fudge cried, opening his eyes wide. "Goody!" He clapped his hands. Mrs. Yarby helped him unwrap his surprise. It was a wind-up train that made a lot of noise. Every time it bumped into something, it turned around and went the other way. Fudge liked it a lot. He likes anything that's noisy. I said, "That's a nice train." Mrs. Yarby turned to me. "Oh, I have something for you too, Peter," I reminded her. "My name is Peter." "Yes, well, I'll go get it." Mrs. Yarby left the room again. This time she came back with a flat package. It was wrapped up too, red ribbon and all. She handed it to me. Fudge stopped playing with his train long enough to come over and see what I got. I took off the paper very carefully in case my mother wanted to save it, and also to show Mrs. Yarby that I'm a lot more careful about things than my brother. I'm not sure she noticed. My present turned out to be a big picture dictionary, the kind I liked when I was about 4 years old. My old one is in Fudge's bookcase now. "I don't know much about big boys," Mrs. Yarby said, "so the lady in the store said a nice book would be a good idea." A nice book would have been a good idea, I thought, but a picture dictionary, that's for babies. I've had my own regular dictionary since I was 8. But I knew I had to be polite, so I said, "Thank you very much. It's what I've always wanted." "I'm so glad," Mrs. Yarby said. She let out a long sigh and sat back on the sofa. My father offered the Yarbys a drink. Good idea, Mr. Yarby said. "What'll be?" my father asked. "What'll be?" Mr. Yarby repeated, laughing. "What do you think, Hatcher? It'll be Juicy-O." "That's all we ever drink. Good for your health." Mr. Yarby pounded his chest. "Of course," my father said, like he knew it all along. "Juicy-O for everyone. my father told my mother. She went into the kitchen to get it. While my father and Mr. Yarby were discussing Juicy O, Fudge disappeared. Just as my mother served everyone a glass of Mr. Yarby's favorite drink, he came back. He was carrying a book, my old, worn-out picture dictionary, the same as the one the Yarbys just gave me. "See," Fudge said, climbing up on Mrs. Yarby's lap. "See, book." I wanted to vanish. I think my mother and father did too. "See, book." Now Fudge held it up over his head. "I can use another one," I explained. "I really can. That old one is falling apart." I tried to laugh. "It's returnable," Mrs. Yarby said. "It's silly to keep it if you already have one." She sounded insulted, like it was my fault she brought me something I already had. "Mine," Fudge said. He closed the book and held it tight against his chest. "Mine, mine, mine." "It's the thought that counts," my mother said. "It was so nice of you to think of our boys." Then she turned to Fudge. "Put the book away now, Fudgy." "Isn't it Fudgy's bedtime?" my father hinted. "Oh, yes, I think it is," my mother said, scooping him up. "Say good night, Fudgy." "Good night, Fudgy," my brother said, waving at us. Fudge was supposed to fall asleep before we sat down to dinner. But just in case, my mother put a million little toys in his crib to keep him busy. I don't know who my mother thought she was fooling, because we all know that Fudge can climb out of his crib any old time he wants.